These are Kawthar and Saadia, the most famous names in Monufia 20 years ago. Their lives were a direct interaction with the devil, as they practiced all kinds of witchcraft. Their fame surpassed all boundaries, and their lives were terrifying, as was their end. The complete story. In 2003, in Monufia Governorate, specifically in a village in Badger Centre, there was a long line of people, each waiting for their turn to meet Kawthar and Saadia. The common talk among people was that they came to receive blessings, but they knew well that they came to meet the most famous witches in the area, who managed to convince people that they were the reason for their happiness or their demise. Anyone who dared to defy their words was severely punished. Kawthar and Saadia had an extraordinary ability to control people's minds, and everyone who went to them did so willingly. The place was actually crowded, but once you entered their house, you found a completely different world. The house was organized in a way that each person had their own space. Those who wanted a simple spell or to undo one had a room, and those who wanted black magic or something more difficult had a completely different place. Everything had its price. No one in the village dared to approach their house out of fear, and anyone seeking safety would stay away even from their wall. Everything changed when their children woke up to find Kawthar and Saadia murdered, and lying on the floor in their living room, drenched in their blood, their throats slit, and their hands completely severed from their bodies, with fingers scattered in different places. The scene was extremely terrifying, so the villagers quickly informed the authorities due to the horror of the report. The authorities arrived with forensic experts to try to determine what happened in Kawthar and Saadia's house. The first observation was that there were no signs of forced entry. All doors and windows were intact, and it was clear that the crime had happened an hour or two at most before. The last people who left their house were at 2 a.m., and the entire crime occurred in the entrance of the house. Kawthar's body was very close to the door, and Saadia's was a bit farther away. The important observation was that the throat slitting and hand cutting were done with a very sharp knife in a very professional manner, indicating that the perpetrator had significant experience in using the knife and in executing the kill quickly and efficiently. The bodies were transported to the forensic department to determine the time and cause of death. The forensic observations were similar. The throat slitting and hand cutting were done professionally. As for the time of death, it was strange. The difference between their deaths was just minutes, and it was clear that there was no resistance, indicating that the perpetrator was well known to them. Investigations began to understand what happened to Kawthar and Saadia. The villagers said that what happened to them was either a curse from the devil upon them, or that they were performing a spell that backfired. Of course, these sayings did not convince the authorities, as the investigation required logical evidence and testimonies. About 6 years ago, Kawthar and Saadia chose to work in witchcraft and sorcery, performing spells for people and undoing spells for others. Their work in deceit and sorcery was highly successful due to the large number of people who came to them, whether from the village or surrounding areas, and sometimes from distant governorates. 2 years after starting their work, they bought the house where they were killed and lived there with their children. They quickly amassed a large fortune from people, which was evident from the amount of gold they had. For this reason, the authorities speculated that the hand cutting was aimed. This time, the information did not surface, even though it was mentioned naturally in the witness's statement. However, it caught the attention of the authorities because this man was a butcher, and the way the throats were slit and the hands were severed indicated that the perpetrator was skilled and experienced with a knife. Small villages are characterized by the fact that people know each other and often even know intimate details about one another. When the authorities asked the villagers about this butcher, it turned out his name was Shaban al-Sayed, a butcher in the Al-Sharabiya area of Cairo. However, he was married to a woman from the same village and occasionally spent days with her before returning to Cairo. The authorities decided to investigate Shaban al-Sayed and discovered that, after being a successful butcher making a lot of money, he began experiencing financial difficulties and found himself in significant debt, an unusual situation for him. This was a very important piece of information for the authorities, as it suggested that he might have committed the crime out of desperation for money. The suspicion around him was not just because of his profession, but also due to his dire financial situation, which might have driven him to theft. The authorities moved to El Sharabia and arrested him at his butcher's shop. He confirmed to them that he hadn't traveled to the village in a week and had witnesses to support his claim. However, the authorities confronted him with a witness from his area who confirmed seeing him leave home on the day of the crime at 4 a.m., an unusual time for him. Additionally, many witnesses at the public transportation stop saw him boarding a vehicle heading to Monufia. Realizing there was no hope, Shaban decided to confess. He told the authorities that he was the one who committed the crime and explained the reason. He said that Kawthar and Saadia had ruined his life with their witchcraft. He began to recount what happened in detail. After marrying and living in the village, he noticed that his wife frequently visited Kawthar and Saadia's house. Over time, he began to feel strange things and became convinced that Kawthar and Saadia had cast a binding spell on him, linking him to his wife and making him unable to leave her. Shaban decided to visit Kawthar and Saadia and asked them if he was under a spell. Of course, being con artists, they confirmed he was under a spell and that they had the cure. They added that they were the ones who cast the spell and they were the only ones capable of undoing it. They assured him that the spell was very strong because his wife had brought many items to make it, and undoing it would require a lot of money and specific requests. Thus, Shaban entered the vicious cycle of fraud and deception. Kawthar and Saadia began demanding money and specific requests from him continuously, claiming the spell was very strong and needed great efforts to break it. Because of this, Shaban drained all his money and became heavily indebted to many people, leading to immense psychological pressure. During this time, all Shaban could think about was how to get out of this situation. Thoughts of revenge against Kawthar and Saadia, whom he blamed for his troubles, began to swirl in his mind. He believed that by killing them, he would break the spell that afflicted him. Shaban decided to settle the matter and began planning to kill Kawthar and Saadia without being accused of the crime. On the day of the execution, he traveled from Cairo before dawn and arrived at Kawthar and Saadia's house at 6 a.m. He knocked on the door, and when Kawthar opened it, he told her he had brought the items they requested to break the spell. When she turned her back to him, he attacked her, smothered her, and drew a knife from his robe to slit her throat. According to his confession, he said he watched her twitch on the ground like a slaughtered animal. Due to Kawthar's noise, Saadia woke up, so Shaban surprised her and slit her throat as well beside her sister. After ensuring they were dead, Shaban tried to take the rings and gold bracelets they were wearing, but there were too many, and taking them would take too long. Therefore, he decided to cut off their hands and fingers to take the gold. Quickly, after finishing, he entered the bedroom, stole the money there, and fled. Shaban had planned everything carefully, so he wore two robes on top of each other, knowing that one would get stained with blood. After committing the crime, he removed the outer robe and threw it in the nearest sewage drain before returning to Cairo. Shaban had decided to travel from El Sharabia to Monufia at dawn to arrive by 6 a.m., knowing that people would be asleep at that time, ensuring no one would witness or have evidence of his presence in the village during the crime. On the same day, he made sure to stay with people in his area in El Sharabia for a long time, trying to prove his presence there the whole time. Shaban completed everything in less than 15 minutes, but no matter how smart and well-planned he thought he was caught and reenacted the crime in detail. After the trials, he was sentenced to death. All these actions resulted from ignorance. Kawthar and Saadia, and others like them, exploited people's lack of faith, as they chose a life built on deception and fraud. Their end was logical and fitting. The haunting tale of Kawthar and Saadia serves as a stark reminder of the shadows that lurk behind the facade of seemingly ordinary lives. Their story intertwines with the themes of deception, supernatural influence, and the ultimate quest for retribution. As we delve into their dark legacy, we uncover profound lessons about faith, fear, and the consequences of manipulating others. Asterisk, if this story captivated your imagination and left you pondering its deeper meanings, we invite you to join us on a journey through more tales of intrigue and mystery. Subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more content that explores the hidden corners of our world. Your support and curiosity drive us to continue unearthing and sharing these compelling stories. Don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button and become part of our community of inquisitive minds.